Hi everyone, this is Serena from Onward Light. We're at onward.community if you'd like to follow along with us. And I'm here today to talk about the essential things you need to get going with your virtual home yoga practice. So you might be wondering, where do I find the space? Do I need to buy things? Are there ways I could use things around the home? So I want to talk about that today and tell you a little bit about the things I think would be really helpful for you to have, and then also some alternatives that you can use around your home so you don't have to lay out a bunch of money. If you'd like to make some purchases, I will give my recommendations too. Let's get into it. Where do you practice? You can really practice anywhere that you can fit the yoga mat, which actually is not too much space. It's about 6.5 feet long. And then in terms of your moving side to side, it's about 5 feet wide. So when I was living in a smaller apartment, what I would do was to push the couch to the side and lay down my mat. You could also use a corner of your bedroom, or like I'm doing, this is my office space, and maybe like a quarter of the room that is dedicated to the mat and the space around it. If you need suggestions about how to arrange a specific space so that you can practice there, let me know in the comments and I will answer you specifically about what you could do. Now, in terms of props, the first thing you probably think about is a yoga mat. Those are helpful to have. So the yoga mat helps you to not slip around. It helps provide cushioning and support as you're doing the practice. And there are many inexpensive yoga mats that you can get pretty much anywhere. So if you want to go for an inexpensive version because you're not sure, are you going to like it? Are you going to want to continue? I get it. Budgets are limited. Those, in my experience, tend to have a couple of pitfalls. One of them is if you're very sensitive to smell, you might bother you that the smell is a little chemically. And the second is that they're a little bit more slippery. It doesn't necessarily factor in for every person, depends on what practice you're doing. But I personally like a little bit more of a non-slip surface because I feel more stable and safe. So all that being said, you could use a non-slip surface that you already have in your home somewhere. Like if you have a fitness mat or if you have a rug that is particularly non-slippy. The key thing is you just don't want to be slipping around and tripping over things as you're trying to move around. Now, if you decide I'm ready to invest in a quality item that I'm going to keep like forever, well, I guess I can't promise it's forever, but I will show you that this mat is a Manduka mat, and it was an investment. I bought this in 2012, and it is currently 2025, and I will show you a little closer that it honestly, you cannot, there's a couple smudges, but you can barely tell. It looks pretty new, and it feels pretty new too. So that is one recommendation that I can tell you has stood the test of time. Okay, so now moving on to props. I'm going to show you props you could purchase and then alternatives for things you might have around your house that you could use too. So if you're going to purchase props, I think the first thing that is helpful is yoga blocks. There's just so many ways that you could use them in practice. You can use them to give yourself some extra space when you're doing a forward bend or a standing practice, or even when you're in like a cat-cow position. Sometimes it can feel really nice to have just a little extra space underneath you. They're also useful if you're going to be doing restorative postures because they can, kind of prop you up in different ways. I will say also, just as a side note, they are very useful around the house for other things. My computer that I'm filming this on is propped on a block. So you will find uses for them. I think this is a good investment. It doesn't have to be a fancy brand. I personally like the cork blocks. I feel like they're a little bit more stable. These Hugger Mugger ones have lasted me, gosh, at least 10 years. But there's also foam ones too if you prefer a little more softness in the block. Now, if you don't want to spend money on blocks, what you can do is potentially use a chair for a lot of these things. So for example, say you're in a standing forward bend and where you would use some blocks to prop yourself up a little bit, you could use this chair, right? Or say you're in a triangle pose and you're using the block You could use the chair too. It's a little more clunky because it doesn't, you have to move it around, it doesn't quite move as well. What you want to look for is a chair that doesn't have wheels on it and that it's stable and sturdy. Okay, so that's the key thing there. If you get a chair like this that's a folding chair, you can use it for chair yoga practices too, which is really nice. So blocks would be my first purchase. You don't want to buy them? Maybe try a chair. Now, something else that you'll want at your very first class is a yoga blanket. Well, I should say a blanket. It will be used for yoga, but it does not need to be any special blanket. I think it's helpful if the blanket can roll up in different ways, and that way you could use it in different ways for different postures, or to have padding, for example, underneath your knees if you're doing cat-cow position, or underneath your head during the lying down portion of the class. So a blanket is a really good thing to have. Now, you probably have a blanket around the house, but just in case you don't, you could also use a towel. So this would work just fine too. Moving right along. Now, for some classes, you might need a strap. So this is a yoga strap. It's got a buckle on it so that you can use the strap in like a loop. In many classes, what you can do is actually just use something that's similar in terms of strength, in terms of length. So what I've got here is a robe tie, like something you tie your robe with. So you could use that. Finally, it is very helpful to have a couple of pillows or a bolster. This is a yoga bolster. Hugger Mugger is one of my favorite brands. They are a little more firm than a pillow, so they've got a little bit more heft to them, so they're more supportive. This is helpful to do restorative yoga. It's also very helpful if you're doing seated meditation, because you can prop yourself up on this and be a lot more comfortable. Get one where you can take the cover off and wash it too. So these are more expensive. If you don't want to invest in that right away, what you can do is just grab some comfy, cozy pillows. So these are just throw pillows, and these work for a lot of ways that you would use the bolster. So they can work for a restorative posture. You could stack them like that, and you could have your restorative posture. You could place them underneath your knees for your Shavasana shape in the horizontal orientation. So there's a lot of ways that you could use these similar to how you would use a bolster. And I always tell my students, if you don't have a bolster, go ahead to your couch, grab a couple pillows, we're good to go. Now, we'll get more into this in future videos, but people ask, how can I make the yoga space feel special? So there's a couple ways. I think bare minimum, if you can close the door to the space you're in, that can be very helpful. You have this privacy and you have the space to yourself for a moment. Another thing, you can bring in a candle, especially if it's one that you really enjoy the smell of. The sense of smell and the flickering candlelight can help it feel like a special space, right? So that it's a little bit apart from your day-to-day. You just want to make sure, of course, you're putting the candle not somewhere where you're going to knock it over. You want to put it somewhere where it's going to be nice and stable. An alternative to the candle, if you don't want fire, is one of these salt lamps. And these are not expensive, actually. And this is nice because you can keep reusing it. And this is Himalayan salt. It has this beautiful orange color to it that feels very calming. They're also very easy to get. Any home goods store, I think, these days has them. I hope that was helpful. If it was, you know what to do. Subscribe, like, comment. And if you still have questions, let me know. And I'm happy to talk with you more specifically about your scenario and what you might need to get started with your virtual practice. All right, everybody. Take good care, and I hope I'll see you soon.